Now, the Prime Minister is back to his favourite pastime, which is holding court with foreign leaders, this time over at the Pope's inauguration. The first Australian PM to go to the inaugural Mass since we established diplomatic relations with the Holy See in the 70s, by the way. And Albanese clearly charmed the European Union because they're now keen to strike a new defence deal with Australia. Here was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen meeting with Albanese.
We do not only see you as a trading partner, but we see you as a strategic partner. We would be very pleased if we could develop such a security and defence partnership too.
To help break down what this is supposed to look like, what this deal might look like, I'm joined now by Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, Michael Shoebridge. Michael, based on what we've heard so far, and we know that the EU has done deals with a number of other nations recently, what would they be expecting of us and what should we be expecting of them?
Well, Caleb, I think the EU's expectations are really very simple. They would be expecting Australia to have looked at what they agreed with Japan and South Korea recently, and they've just signed another Defence and Security Cooperation Agreement with the UK. And it's a broad framework that says, let's work more closely together. The mystifying thing to me is that the Prime Minister seemed to be either very badly briefed or not have remembered what the brief would have told him, because he sounded like he was mystified by the whole thing and it was at a very early stage. It's very likely that the text that the EU would propose would look almost exactly like the publicly available text that they've signed with Japan and South Korea, just with replace all, putting Australia in instead.
If that's the case and Albo's not across it, I mean, what was he talking to them about? What was the point? He went all the way there. Surely he went there to do a deal.
Well, I think this is the problem, really. When he does these visits, he seems to think just having the meeting is the outcome and maybe agreeing to meet again. And I've certainly met plenty of diplomats in our Foreign Affairs department that think meetings are the outcome. But really, when the Prime Minister talked about it, he talked about maybe we'd have negotiations on it within NATO. Well, NATO is an entirely different organisation to the EU. He just sounds disinterested in security.
And also nothing to do with us, it should be noted. I've often said that I hate meetings. I think that they're the preserve of people who want to look like they're being productive without actually being productive, because you can gasbag about stuff that could have just been put in an email. But to the broader defence policy here, I mean, you know, I guess we can't just rely on the US anymore. And of course, the moves that Trump has made in recent months has forced outfits like the EU to look after themselves a little bit more and increase their spending. Same with the UK, etc. We're no different.
Well, that's right. So there could be some meat around this EU-Australia Security Cooperation as the EU starts spending €150 billion, a new fund they've just put together. That could be some opportunities for Australian defence companies. But I think we've got to keep pretty low expectations about what Europe and Australia might do together. One reason that occurs to me why Mr Albanese was reluctant to even talk about this is if he had read the agreements that have been entered between the EU with Japan and South Korea, he would see that they're agreeing that really Russia and China are a common challenge for Europe and our part of the world. And he wants to run a mile from that characterisation.
Why would you run a mile from that characterisation? Well, we know why, to pander to China. But honestly, if you want to protect your country, you can't run a mile from that characterisation. We know it's going on. It's something we all have to stand up against. And how could we expect allies, be they in Europe or the US or the UK or anyone else, to stand by us if we're not willing to acknowledge the same things that they are?
Well, I agree with you, Caleb. And really, if Mr Albanese was thinking security was important and wanted to build a relationship with the EU, he could have pulled out a draft text where he had written Australia instead of Japan and said, we'd be ready to sign this today. But instead, we hear about it's at a very early stage and we'll have further chats and it might go on for some time. It's all just the way he behaved in his first term. If I can have meetings and more words with no outcomes, that's a good day.
Just very quickly before we go, Michael, speaking of meetings, Albo also met with Vladimir Zelensky and discussed Oscar Jenkins, of course, the Aussie who's been sentenced in Russia. What should we expect out of that?
Well, I tell you what, if Mr Albanese could actually deliver the 49 old tanks that we promised to give Ukraine in October last year, he might get President Zelensky's attention and full cooperation. So I think that'd be a good thing for him to do. But really, there is some possibility that Oscar Jenkins could be rolled into a Ukraine-Russia prisoner swap. That happened with some British nationals earlier in the war. But I really think it's about engaging with Ukraine, supporting them and delivering on our promises, like getting tanks there in under a year.